In life's journey, we must seek to reflect, learn, and grow. Welcome to the Road to Rediscovery with your host, Aubrey Johnson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on life's lessons to learn and grow from them and to take it to the next level and help others who are struggling through dark times. You know, we've often bruised ourselves when playing sports, right? Or some other type of rigorous activity. The black and blue marks on our skin are visual and they're visible. And they're visual reminders of our pain, right? Over time, this bruise usually, it fades away, but not the exact can be said about mental and emotional bruises after a traumatic experience. In fact, you know what? Scratch that. They're not bruises, they're wounds. They are wounds and they don't go away easily. Leave them unattended to over time. The guilt, shame, and anger and other feelings spread throughout your body like a venom, leading you possibly to the unspeakable and the unthinkable. My special guest lived with this guilt and shame for over 20 years after she was a victim of childhood sexual abuse. She sought help and survived, and now she is thriving. She's the editor in chief for the Authentic Insider magazine, hosts her show, a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast, and is a champion of debunking the stigma around mental illness. Get ready to hear a journey of recovery and development. Let's welcome Lorilee Binstock to the show. Hey, Lorilee. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Aubrey. I really appreciate you inviting me on.
Oh, no problem. We reciprocate. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule and coming to chat with us. I am so excited to get into this conversation. You've had an incredible journey, and usually I start out by asking my guests to share where they're from, what was life like growing up, and so forth. And I understand that you suffered sexual abuse in your childhood. So if I could ask, how was life or your childhood leading up to that? I'm not sure how early it started, but leading up to that, how was it?
Well, it was around the age of 9 and 10, but my
Okay.
household, you know, from the outside, it looked perfectly fine. If
Hmm.
not, I feel like maybe some people would say like envious. It looked like I had everything I needed. My parents worked hard. Um, but I never really felt safe.
Mm,
And I think a lot of that had to do with, my mom worked several jobs and she did so to, help put, take care of us, put my brother and I through college. She also
right.
put like my cousins through college who were living in the Philippines. My parents came over from the
Hmm.
Philippines. My dad was actually in the Navy.
Mm,
Um, but, you know, culturally, they don't typically believe in, mental health.
right.
It's really not a thing that they talk about. My mom's motto used to be, just don't think about it. Just don't think about it.
Mm, kind of
And of
taboo.
course you think about it. You can't just shoo trauma away. But I
Right.
dealt with a lot of neglect from my mom. But my dad was very doting. He was
Mm,
very
right.
doting, and I just loved him so much.
Mm, mhm.
But then, around the age of 9, 10, um, I he started. I guess it was just grooming, and then eventually, um, he started sexually abusing me.
Okay.
And so it was a really hard house to be in, and
Mhm,
I didn't really have friends. I felt like they isolated me a lot because they always wanted to know where I was.
mhm.
And I just, I try once I started making friends, I tried to get out more, but
Right,
it
right.
didn't they just didn't they just would say, "No, no, you don't need to go out.
Mhm,
Stay
mhm,
home with your family."
mhm.
And the abuse, I don't know how long it lasted. I really tried to forget about everything about it, but
Right.
obviously that feeling of being unsafe,
Yeah.
that the trauma, the PTSD stuck around. I didn't even realize it.
Yes. Yeah.
But, I began self-harming. With PTSD, you pick up these maladaptive coping skills to make you feel safe.
Right.
I began, smoking pot, drinking
Right.
at a very,
Yeah.
very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
I became sexually active, like
Right.
hypersexual. And,
Right.
these are just things I thought, just this is who I am, right? I didn't
Right.
realize
Right.
literally until last year that these were symptoms of trauma, and specifically sexual abuse. So it was a really hard home to be in, and
Sure.
eventually I started self-harming.
Mm-hmm.
And it really got to a point where I was like, okay, mom, I think I need to see somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was like, no, I just don't think about it. Whatever's bothering you,
Uh,
just don't think about it.
so did your mother know?
I don't think she did.
No.
She
Okay.
worked long hours. She worked at two
Mm-hmm.
different hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
So she worked extensive hours. So I don't feel like she knew. However, I don't even know if she would believe me if I did tell her. So, um,
Gotcha. So this was
that's
something you kept to yourself.
I kept to myself.
Yeah.
I didn't talk about it. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even say it to myself out
Really.
loud.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it was just one of those things. It was the shame around it was difficult. Every once in a while, I would have these episodes where I just didn't want to be alive anymore.
Mm.
And sometimes then I would get flashbacks. And then I
Right.
some every and eventually, I lived when we didn't have the internet.
Right.
So
Yeah.
around college, I don't know, I had a flashback and I started Googling like sexual abuse,
Mm-hmm.
childhood sexual abuse. I don't
Mm-hmm.
even remember what the exact words were,
Okay.
but there was nothing out there.
Mm.
Nobody talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my head, I was alone. Like there was no one else
Oh
out
my
there.
gosh. Really? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such an isolated feeling, isn't it?
Hmm.
Being alone and even like when you're out of the house and you're with friends, you could be at a at a place having a slice of pizza or maybe going to one of your high school basketball games or football games, and you're socializing with friends and everything. Just and on the surface, like you said, on the outside, everything looks normal. It looks
Hmm.
good. You appear to be fine, but it sounds like there was just a storm, a thunderstorm of emotions,
Yeah.
instabilities, insecurities going through
So
um,
many.
inside of you. It sounds like, and if you don't mind, I'd like to see if we can maybe hone in on that. And the reason
Mhm,
why is because for the benefit of our listeners, okay, um, if you can paint a picture that just that shares with them what you are going through, I believe this will touch a lot of hearts of our listeners who may be going through something similar. And so 20 plus years of living with a secret can be really tumultuous, right, for someone
mhm.
who's endured what you have. and
Yeah.
and I'm thinking that you went through a whole myriad of emotions, right? Sadness, anger, confusion,
Oh, yeah.
feeling victimized, and more. So um what were some of those emotions, and what mindset did you kind of have to tell yourself in order to, I guess, for lack of a better term, outwardly function?
Yeah, I was high functioning.
Okay.
In
Okay.
some ways I was.
Right.
It made it difficult in school. I I I was not doing well in school.
Mm,
Middle school, I was just not doing well.
right.
Eventually, I was diagnosed ADHD.
Hmm.
Um, and I think a lot of it had to do with the distractions.
Hmm.
I couldn't focus. I was thinking of not wanting to be home. And then
Right.
eventually it was, for people who are being abused at home, they feel like leaving the house and being at school
Yeah.
or somewhere else. Well,
Yeah.
that's their safe place. But then I just felt stupid when I went to school because I couldn't function. I didn't do well in school.
Mm.
And so
Was it focus? Were you unable to focus,
I was
or
unable to focus.
so you
I
were
had,
preoccupied?
yes, I think I was preoccupied and
Okay.
just being scared to be home,
Mm-hmm.
just anticipating the anxiety of going home. But
Right.
another thing, what I'm realizing is as a child, my mother was very impatient with me. She was
Oh, really?
extremely impatient with me because she worked, she was exhausted. As a mother now, I can understand. But when she
Mm-hmm.
had to help me with homework,
Mm-hmm.
she would, and she would get frustrated. She
Mm.
would start banging on the table, hitting things, throwing things, getting really frustrated with me.
Mm.
Um, and that scared me.
Yeah.
And so anytime that I was working on any homework or anything at school, I would get those flashbacks, and then it was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And before I knew it, the time to take the quiz was over. And then it
Yeah.
was like Christmas tree everything.
Yeah. 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 That's right. Christmas tree, everything, or as I like to say, abracadabra.
Right.
Someone told me a long time ago, I'd never done it, but in a rush job, maybe someone told me a long time ago, if you ever uh, take a test where you don't know any of the answers and it's multiple choice, just do abracadabra. A,
Maybe.
B, yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, yeah, right. So,
Yep.
so this came back to you in a form of a flashback when you were in college,
Yes.
when
Well, multiple times
multiple
actually.
times, like high school, even.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
yeah. So there was a time when I was probably around 16 years old.
Hmm.
And another thing is, as a coping mechanism, I was just kind of taking whatever drugs anyone gave me.
Sure.
Um, and one day, someone had mushrooms.
Mm.
And I remember I took these mushrooms, and I was having a problem. I think it was just, I was also not around the best people to be
Right.
doing them with.
Right.
I was not in that mindset.
Hmm.
And then I started getting flashbacks of the abuse, and I
Hmm.
couldn't get away from it. Like, I really thought the only way to get away from them
Hmm.
was to kill myself. And that was, and although I didn't,
Right.
I couldn't escape it. It was like all of these different, it was probably the first time I actually thought about it, and not,
Hmm.
because I think anytime that it popped in my head, I
Yeah.
would literally just shake my head to like shake out the
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
memory.
Yeah.
um but that wasn't working this time, because I was under the
Yeah.
influence of mushrooms.
Sure.
And looking back at that, I think, because I'm a big proponent of psychedelics for healing, but when
Yes.
I look back at that, and I think this was another reason why I was interested in psychedelics once I learned that I was dealing with PTSD,
Right.
was I would have to confront it
Hmm.
with that, because there was a point 2 years ago in 2019 where I realized I think I might be dealing with PTSD, and I
Hmm.
think I might be dealing with PTSD from the sexual abuse.
Hmm.
So I remember going to my therapist and being like, okay, something happened to me, and I just sat there silently. I was like, I can't talk about it.
Right.
And I had my therapist scheduled every week. Each week I would tell myself, okay, I'm ready to talk about it. And
Yes.
then I couldn't.
Mm.
So I realized that something needed to really happen for me to talk about it.
Mm.
Um, but I just couldn't. Eventually, at the end of 2019, it was during the holidays, I brought my family home to
Okay.
visit my family
Right.
in Jacksonville, Florida. Um, and I think I was feeling very uncomfortable at that point. I didn't want to leave my children at home with my dad.
Yeah.
Um, but my husband noticed that I was a little more on edge than usual.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I slowly started deteriorating until
Mm.
February 2020. I tried to take my life for probably the sixth time in my lifetime. But this time previously I had, um, trigger warning. I've
Yeah.
tried overdosing.
Yeah.
Um, it was like this time I was like, I really, I really mean business. So I attempted to hang myself.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
and it was a really, really hard time. My family, they were my daughter and my son were out at a birthday party, and my husband's like, what's going on? What's going on? Okay, I need to pick up the kids, but I can't bring them back here.
Hmm.
Um, and so when he left, that's when I attempted to, but
Hmm.
then I was having a hard time. And eventually I heard him come home, and I fell off of the stool.
Mm.
And when he walked in, pretty much I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this anyways. I might as well just tell him. I feel like I've reached the lowest part of, I've really reached the bottom.
Oh
And
my goodness.
so I felt like I just said it.
Yeah.
And I honestly thought that he'd be like, I, I don't know what to do with you now. But he was extremely supportive. It was like the
Good.
complete opposite.
Right.
And just saying the words out loud
Hmm.
lifted so much weight from my shoulders.
Saying what words? The
I
words he
was
said.
sexually abused by my
Oh,
father.
oh, saying those words.
Yeah, I
A
told
huge
him.
weight.
Huge
Mm.
weight,
And
because
was
I never
this
said it.
amazing? This is, you kept this secret for so long, and it just ate you up inside.
Hmm.
It sounds like, and so at this moment, this event that you're sharing with us now, um, did you say it was February of 2020?
Hmm. It was February of 2020.
Amazing.
And then my husband said, okay, well, we're going to get the help. We're going to get help. And he started looking into residential treatment centers.
Right.
Then
Right.
we spoke to somebody who suggested Sierra Tucson in Arizona.
Okay.
And a week later I was there for 31 days.
Wow.
um, and it was interesting. I mean, it was, yeah, I remember going through the gates, and there was this big sign that says expect a miracle.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've done therapy for so much of my life.
Yes.
What is,
Yes.
I mean, maybe I'll be able to just not have the responsibilities, but miracle. Um, but yeah, I left there feeling like I've I've I achieved this miracle.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm healed, but
Right.
I was able to really dig deep and really work. At the beginning of your intro, you mentioned, these bruises. And I do look at trauma as this, as this open wound.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, if you get a nasty cut,
Hmm.
you know, it slowly heals. But what happens to that skin? It gets thicker, it gets thicker and tougher.
Sure does.
Um, and I felt like once I left treatment,
Hmm.
I felt stronger and tougher. I felt like, yes, there are parts of that
Beautiful.
wound
Beautiful.
that was
Yes.
just
Hmm.
that was just, there's still parts of it that are still a little raw, but
Hmm.
it's slowly closing up.
Right.
Um, and getting tougher, and that's how I feel now, and that's kind of how I look at this healing journey.
Extraordinary. Absolutely. Absolutely extraordinary, Lorilee. So, can you share with us during the early parts of your recovery, or sometime within those 31 days, as you were, recovering, was there a specific thing or event or discussion or activity that made you realize that you can live a life free from this internal suffering?
It's funny that you ask, because I did so many modalities there, and I felt
Hmm.
like each one got me closer to healing.
So it was
Um,
incremental, maybe.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, but I was doing this, the type of therapy I did there was therapy I never even heard of.
Really?
Therapy I didn't even know existed.
Uh-huh.
I did somatic experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
I did somatic emotional release.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
did neurofeedback. I did EMDR, which I knew about, but which was extremely helpful. I did
Yes.
revisioning, which is like this cutting edge um, treatment
Mm-hmm.
that they're working on there. I think they're the only treatment center um, in the country, if not the world, that's actually doing this.
Okay.
And so there was just so many different things, and then there was one thing that was really, it was the end of my treatment. It was called a burning ceremony, and I wrote a letter to my father,
Okay. All
and
right.
then we were, it was a group of us around in this place called the Kiva. It's like a stone amphitheater, and in
Mm-hmm.
the middle is this like stone podium with like this bonfire.
Okay.
And we talk about what we wanted to leave there, what we wanted to burn to the ground, and then what we wanted to release into the universe.
Right.
Um and I wanted to leave this feeling of um I obviously burned the letter,
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted to release this feeling, this fear of judgment.
Right.
I always grew up with this fear of judgment, and I think a lot of it had to do with I didn't want people to know what was really happening in my life.
Right. Right.
But another thing, my parents always told me, like, people are watching you. Make sure you behave.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that made me really paranoid,
Yeah.
to be
Put you on
honest.
alert.
Yeah,
Yeah. A little
yeah.
hypersensitive. Yeah.
Right, and then you
Yeah.
assume everyone's talking about you and not saying
Right.
nice things, because
Right.
obviously my parents use that as a fear tactic to get me to
I see.
behave,
To comply or whatever.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
comply.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Um,
Wow. Amazing. Um, Man, it's from generation to generation, it's amazing how things change from how our parents treat us or treated us when we were growing up. In a lot of cases, we kind of repeat
mhm.
how we treat our children when we become parents. But
Yeah.
then there are certain things that you know our parents treated us under, where it's like we don't like it, and we tell ourselves, I'm never gonna put my child through this, or I'm never gonna do this to my child like my mom did to me, or like my dad did to
Mhm.
me, and so forth. And so from generation to generation, I mean, like a scare tactic to comply like that, I'm
Mhm.
very familiar with growing up, with my parents and everything. It's like, wait until your dad gets home and stuff like that. So it's like, oh, okay, I better comply, and then
Right.
I don't know. There's some byproduct where, to some degree, you become a little hypersensitive in
Mhm.
thinking what people think about you and everything, and then that even encourages you to not to further remain silent, right?
Right.
And not say
Mhm.
anything or share anything because of that fear of wondering what they're saying, or
What
if
they're
they're judging you,
thinking.
right?
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
man. And um, those are demons, just like
Mhm.
the guilt and the shame, uh, that hypersensitivity and paranoia. It's all toxic. Those are all
Yeah.
demons.
It'll really eat at you.
Yeah, it really will. So Lorilee, on your website, you mentioned that um, facing your demons head on is a choice. Can you kind of unpack that for the listeners, and further dig into that?
Yeah, well, it's not an easy choice. It
Mm,
really
no.
it's really hard work to actually
Hmm.
really, because you kind of have to address it. You have to actually admit to yourself that these things happened.
Right.
Um and I think for a lot of people it's and I completely understand. I was there too. It's easy to say, that doesn't bother me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine. It happened. It was in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I can move on.
Gotcha.
But the truth is, your body, your nervous system remembers what
Mm-hmm.
happened
Mm-hmm.
when you experienced the event, the trauma.
Yes.
And there are going to be triggers where you're not going to realize that when something else happens, and then you're reactive to
Right.
a
You don't
different
notice it.
situation, but it's
Right.
your nervous system that remembers. It's your
Mm-hmm.
body that remembers the trauma, and it's triggered again.
I see.
um so it's easy to just say, I don't need, I can move on without, that's the past. The past is the past.
Right.
um and I was like that. But after going through multiple suicide attempts, you realize, like, something has to change. I can't just say what's done is done, and now I'm clean.
Yes.
um because it's really about going back to that wound
Yes.
and cleaning it up.
Yeah.
Because for so long, what I did was band-aid, band-aid,
Exactly.
band-aid,
Exactly.
anything,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, um, whatever I could do, whether it was maladaptive, whether
Mm-hmm.
it was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just drink, or
Yeah.
I'll just, take some
Self-medicate.
drugs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Self-medicate.
Yeah.
Um, that was that's not healing the wound.
No.
That's just putting a band-aid over it.
Yeah.
And that is an easy, I don't want to say it's easy to do, because living with trauma is extremely difficult. But I think really addressing your demons,
Yeah.
addressing the trauma,
Mm-hmm.
having to go back and look
Mm-hmm.
at it,
Mm-hmm.
um, that's a hard choice to make.
Oh, extremely tough. Extremely tough because you have to go through hell and
Mm-hmm.
some very,
Mm,
very dark places. I mean,
yes.
as far as that, to process that, right, to work that through.
Right.
So, not sure, you may not know, but on the road to rediscovery, we have four cornerstones to growth,
Mm-hmm.
and the number one cornerstone is self awareness.
Yeah.
Can you share with me the role that self awareness played in your recovery, the beginning of your recovery, and throughout?
It was admitting that I went through trauma.
Hmm.
To be honest, I didn't really know I went through trauma. I
Hmm.
thought
Hmm.
that, that's just something that happened, and now I
Hmm.
can move on. Um, 10 years ago, I was misdiagnosed bipolar. Um,
Okay.
yes. So I was kind of like, oh, okay, I'm bipolar. So that something's wrong with me. Um, and there's nothing, and I'm just going to be on medication. That's fine. Um, but what I realized, and I kind of just left it at that.
Okay.
I'll take my
Right.
medication if I remember,
Sure.
because the medications also didn't make me feel so great. Um, but the truth is, it was, even if you are bipolar, there's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with being bipolar. Everyone
Yeah.
has their own stuff. But for me, I didn't realize that the abuse was trauma, because
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago they just died. It was the same. This PTSD had the same symptoms, but at that time,
Hmm.
10 years ago, PTSD was only really diagnosed, um mainstream for combat veterans.
I got
um
you.
and so it was immediate, like, oh, okay, well, you're bipolar, so we're going to put you on lithium, and then everything's going to be okay. The
Mm.
thing is, nothing was okay. I was on this medication. I was still not happy. But it wasn't until I actually started working for someone. I was working in PR, a doctor who, or psychiatrist, who had a book called, oh, what was the book? Well, he was one of my clients, and he was sexually abused by his uncle. And
Okay.
he was telling me that, I was going to go to my grave. this is what I was going to go to my grave with, but I needed
Right.
to say something.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so the fact that he said something and he was able to start healing, I was like, okay, maybe it's PTSD that I'm living with.
Yeah.
So just that awareness and doing the research there,
Hmm.
just knowing that, okay, I'm struggling with some sort of trauma. Maybe
Hmm.
this is the root to everything, to all of my different behaviors. Come to
Right.
find out, it really was.
Hmm.
Um, but just knowing that, just the self-awareness of knowing that there are things that I can do, and that wasn't my fault. I think a lot
That's right.
for
That's right.
forever it was, what
Yeah.
did I do wrong? What did I do to
Yeah.
deserve this?
No. Right. Oh, 100%. So, and that brings up a question. You have to look in that mirror, right? That
Mhm,
proverbial mirror as part of that self-awareness. And so, um, there are some cases, depending on the event or the circumstances that someone may be going through, there are some cases where you look in the mirror and you have to take that hard look in the mirror and hold yourself accountable for the things that you are responsible for, okay, to turn things around, to develop and grow and learn from those things, right? And
mhm,
then there's events such as yours where you had to look in the mirror and 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 acknowledge and also understand that this was not your fault. Okay, you're not accountable for this.
mhm.
This is something you didn't ask to be a part of or brought into, and so even though you're not looking in the mirror in that instance at your shortcomings, okay, as part of processing this, is it still an equally hard look in that mirror?
Uh, yes and no. When it comes to the abuse, I feel like
Hmm.
I've understood that wasn't my
Okay,
fault.
right.
Um, I think what the abuse did to my self-worth,
Hmm.
that is like a constant struggle,
Yes.
something that I'm dealing with constantly,
Hmm.
something I
Hmm.
keep telling myself, like, I am enough, I do enough.
Absolutely.
Um, but it's definitely something that I am absolutely 100% working on. Um,
That's
but yeah,
nice. Okay. Okay. No, great. So, Laura Lee, will you always be recovering?
absolutely.
Mhm.
There was a point, not too long after I got back from treatment when I had a relapse or an episode because
Mhm.
there's just other things that were happening.
Sure.
And I immediately thought, oh my gosh, I failed. I failed. I'm not healed. I'm back to who I was, you know,
Yeah.
a year ago. Truth was, I realized,
Hmm.
you know, the road to recovery is has its ups and downs, peaks and valleys, and I that is what I learned from that moment. That was what I learned. I needed to realize
Hmm.
that it's not linear, you
No,
know,
no. It's
and that has helped me. That
good,
awareness has helped me when I've
good,
had a bad day.
good, good. Um, so glad to hear that. I truly feel that this term recovering is it's unfairly given a bad rap,
Mhm,
or it's a bad connotation that you're recovering and you'll always be recovering. My father was an alcoholic for a lot of years, and in 1982 he went into rehabilitation, and he came back and didn't have a drop, not a drop for the rest of his days. He passed in '06,
mm,
but he didn't have a single drop afterwards. But he always said every day he's a recovering alcoholic. He's a recovering alcoholic, and so I just want to send a message out there, and if you could share with the listeners, why it's okay to be recovering, and it's a good thing, it's not a bad thing. You alluded to it when you explain, what you were going through in recovering and some other things you had to work on to keep from relapsing. But can you explain why it's a good thing to be recovering and to always be recovering if you've gone through something like this?
Yeah, it's because you're always working on yourself. You're
Yes.
always working towards that goal to be healed. Everyone has bad days. The goal in recovery is to not make those bad days, or even if it's just a bad, you know, hour, not to make it a completely bad day or make that bad day into a completely bad week and then turn it into a month. It's shifting your perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
is hard work. That is really hard work, but I think what people um should understand is that it's okay when things will go south.
Right. Right. They
It
will.
will go south.
Yeah.
It's how you respond.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to make the difference in your life.
Yeah, yeah. The response is really the difference. And that really is a testament to your character in how you respond, right?
Mhm.
So, one more question, then I want to talk about the great work that you're doing. Okay. So, what has Laura Lee learned about herself in this journey?
um I've learned that you cannot please everyone. That is
Hmm.
definitely,
So
and
true.
and I think for the longest time I thought that, my parents told me that I needed to please everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And if I because I thought I had to please everyone, and you
Hmm.
can't please everyone, I always
Hmm.
thought I was failing. So I constantly
Ah,
thought I was a failure.
oh,
Um so what I've learned is that it's okay when someone disagrees with you.
yeah.
Totally fine. It's
Hmm.
not anything. It has nothing to do with me if they don't agree with me.
No, you're not a lesser person because of it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
gotcha.
And besides that, it was learning how to kind of navigate parenthood, because
Hmm.
I learned a lot of things, a lot of coping techniques, breathing techniques, meditation, all of that stuff.
Yes.
Um Before treatment, I thought I was being uber productive by just saying, by just, yeah, during, the cool down at, a gym class, I
Uh-huh.
could just go through the list of things I need to do in my head, and then I'll be okay. I'm being productive. But the
Yeah.
truth is, I needed to be present.
Yes.
Being present has made the difference in
It's
my
a
life.
huge difference being in the
Mhm.
present moment, right? It
Right.
really, really does. And I'm a huge proponent of mindful breathing, mindful
Mhm.
meditation, and everything. So I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So Laura Lee, tell us about the great work you're doing with the podcast, with Authentic Insider Magazine, and what was your inspiration? Uh, behind launching this, and how long has it been around? All the good stuff, if you can share with us.
This has all been fairly new. It was basic. I,
Really?
I started it July of last year.
Wow.
Yes. And a lot of things kind of came to do. I was actually writing scripts, some pilots, and a feature. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do some research on this. And
Right.
then because I'm going to do the research, I'm going to be recording people. Maybe I should turn this into a podcast. But the main purpose was, when I was in therapy,
Hmm.
what I realized
Hmm.
was, when I told my story, it gave everyone else permission to tell theirs. And it came
Ah,
back
okay.
to that feeling when I kind of was Googling sexual abuse, and nobody was talking about it.
Hmm.
It was
Hmm.
like scarce.
Yeah.
Now it's everywhere, right?
Yes.
Um, but I felt very isolated. So for Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast, I wanted to invite as many trauma survivors, uh, mostly who are thriving, so people
Yes.
can see, like, there is a way out of this darkness that you are in,
Hmm.
because I didn't think there was.
Mm.
And so I feel like inviting these amazing people on, people can hear, you
Yeah.
know,
Oh yeah.
I'm not alone, and I've been getting a lot of great feedback there. And I've also
100%.
and there was, when I went to treatment, I experienced so many different modalities, holistic modalities to
Hmm.
treat trauma that I never even heard of.
Hmm.
And so that I wanted to interview people about that as well.
Mm.
So that was really my purpose, is just trying to let everyone know that they're not alone. And with Authentic Insider magazine, I it's basically like the podcast. I get contributors to write about their story, but from their own perspective, from their
Right.
own words, without me asking questions,
Okay.
what they want people to know.
Yeah.
Um, and I really love that, because in one magazine, I can have as many people who want to contribute.
Hmm.
And I get to make it all pretty with, like pictures. I work with, an art director who like
Right.
works with me, and we can really make it a very appealing magazine. And really just, if everyone sees all of this, everyone
Yeah.
sees all of these people who are thriving, I feel like it would help them. You know, I may not be talking to them directly, but I do hope I'm
You're
giving
reaching
them,
out to
yeah,
some.
I'm reaching
Yeah.
out to them where they can
Yes.
actually start
Yes.
their healing process, because I feel like everyone really has a chance, has deserves
Oh yeah.
to live
Yeah.
a life worthwhile.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no doubt. Everyone deserves that chance, right?
Hmm.
And people need to know that they're not alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So Laura Lee, how can the listeners connect with you, learn more about you and the great work you're doing, maybe even check out an issue or two of Authentic Insider and maybe one of your podcast episodes?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is at atstpodcast.com.
Okay.
That's the letter A, tstpodcast.com. There
Gotcha.
you can find the podcasts, you can find the magazines, you
Hmm.
can find resources. There's a list of numbers if you are struggling.
Hmm.
There's a list of numbers there that you can call. And just you can learn about the guests who are on my show. They have contact information there as well. Um, so yeah, I mean, I
That's
think
awesome.
that's a great place to start.
Oh, fantastic. Man, that is so awesome. So we will make sure and have direct links to your website, ATSD. No,
atstpodcast.com.
thank you. ATSTpodcast.com.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll have a direct link to that in the episode show notes so people can get to you directly and check out the magazine, the podcast, your story, the guests, and all that good stuff. Oh, Laura Lee, it has been such a pleasure having you on the show, sharing your insights, letting us have a glimpse into who Laura Lee Binstock is. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aubrey. I really appreciate you are just a gracious host, and I really, really love talking to you.
Oh, well, thank you. Likewise, I enjoyed talking with you as well. And now we are going to enter a segment I like to call Three for the Road. In Three for the Road, that's where I ask my guests three random yet thought provoking questions that I challenge you to answer in 5 words or less. So, what do you think, Laura Lee? Are you up for it?
I'm up for it.
All right,
Let's
fantastic.
see.
Okay. And by the way, these are not cookie cutter questions. Okay. I don't ask the same questions to every guest. These are customized for my guests based on their background, expertise, and so forth. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Here we go. I think you're going to do great. Question number one. Question number one to top us off or to kick us off for Three for the Road. What does it mean to be an authentic insider?
To be an authentic insider is to live for yourself. And by living for yourself, you're able to help others.
Beautiful. Live for yourself. Yeah, and by living for yourself, you can live to help others for sure. Beautiful. Love it. Love it. That is authentic. All right. Number two. What defines Laura Lee?
What defines Lorilee? Triumphed over adversity.
3 simple yet powerful words, so meaningful. Power over adversity. Strong, Lorilee, strong. Fantastic. Now, question number 3 is none like the other two. So, don't know where I came up with this, but here we go. To top us off for 3 for the road. You're stranded on an island for 2 years, but can only have one type of food and one type of drink. What would they be?
For the drink, I probably would say coconut water.
Ooh, nice. Okay.
For the one type of food. Ooh, that's a good one. Burgers. I love burgers.
Burgers are
I
so
could
good,
eat
aren't
burgers
they?
all day long, but they have to be good burgers.
Yes. And when you love something so much like a good burger, me it's pizza. I love a good pizza. I hate to say snob, like burger snob or pizza snob, but you scrutinize, okay, and
Mm-hmm.
and you have very discriminating tastes when it comes to that because you know what you like, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Oh man, Lorilee, you did it. Congratulations. That's 3
Woo!
for the
Yeah.
road. Yay. Thank you so very much for coming on the show. Lorilee, I hope we can stay in touch. I would love to have you back on the show like 6, 8 months down the line and just catch up with the listeners, let them know what's going on, any new projects or initiatives that you're kicking off, down that time frame. Would just love to have you back on to touch base.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'd love to be back on. You're
Oh,
great. Thank
oh,
you.
thanks. You are too. Thank you so much. And once again, you can learn more about Lorilee at her website, which we will have in the show notes. There'll be a direct link there. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And please, as a friendly reminder, to subscribe, rate, and review this show on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Spreaker, Libsyn, or wherever you listen to your shows. But more importantly, if you know someone who is going through a very rough time, struggling through some dark days, they have doubt, anxiety, despair, worry, and they seem to be at the end of their rope with no direction to turn, no one to turn to, I humbly ask that you please share this show with them because on the road to rediscovery, we want everyone to know 2 things. Number 1, you are not alone. You are not alone. And number 2, there is always hope. Right? The road to rediscovery, it's a movement, a revolution. And guess what? You are now part of it. We're all roadies on this journey of life, and it sure feels good having you on the road with me. Thanks again for listening. We'll chat again soon.
The Road to Rediscovery is an AJ Shark production.